Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be going over the Grayscale trusts, mainly LTCN and BCHG. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so we are going to talk a little bit in the future about the Grayscale trusts and how they work in correlation with things like the Fed funds rate and the yield curve inversion and the Fed cutting rates and stuff like that. What I will tell you guys about the last cycle is in the last cycle, right around this time of the halving year, we did actually have a significant pullback. Okay. So we had a pullback. You guys can see this actually happened on LTCN. This is when LTCN, when the chart of LTCN started. I'm not sure if this is the inception date of LTCN, but you guys can see. So I believe it was in April of 2020 or May of 20. No, it was May of 2020 that the halving happened for Bitcoin. So this was the halving year. Okay, this was also an election year. This was the year, unfortunately, I know a lot of people are going to try to throw me under the bus for this, but unfortunately, this was the year that Biden got elected. But regardless, we did see LTCN during the halving year have a massive pullback before an eventual rip. Okay. What's interesting about this, and I know this is not really relevant, but GME earnings is coming up. I want to show you guys this from the last cycle. Okay. If you think this is crypto exclusive, you would be gravely mistaken. So this happened a little bit after Bitcoin's rip to the moon, but you guys can see Bitcoin started ripping right around December, right? Shortly after that, GME took off for the moon. Okay. This thing went from literally a couple dollars up to over $120 within a month. And what happened? It had a massive pullback. Okay. Minus 93% before eventually ripping up again and going to another 900% gainer to the upside. Now, do I think that Bitcoin's going to make a lower high as a result of this? No, I do not. Okay, but I just want to point out to you guys that before Bitcoin actually started taking off for all-time highs, these things did kind of have gnarly pullbacks. Okay, same thing with AMC. So I also want to point this out. If we go back to, let's see here. If we go back to, I think, you know what? I think this would actually be better if I do this on the monthly time frame. So let me go over to the monthly. All right, so yeah, let's see here. Okay, so we have, you guys can see this little spike in January 2021 when GME went up. Okay, AMC actually started ripping after GME went to all-time highs, so it didn't rip immediately at the same time as GME. But that's not the point I want to make here. The point I want to make here is that you guys can see a very similar move to LTCN. Okay, so it had this big rip up, and what did it do? It had a massive 75% drop before eventually ripping to brand new highs. Okay, this thing is so ridiculous, I almost can't even measure it. But after that massive 75% drop, this thing took off for the moon and it went up 820% to almost $400 from down there at $40. Roughly about $40, so almost a 10x. So very similar looking chart here to LTCN. I suspect something very similar is probably going to happen with LTCN this time around. The reason why I think that it's different this time, and again, you guys can see here, LTCN. Actually, I got to zoom out a little bit more for this. LTCN, massive drop here. Okay, roughly about this same time during the previous halving cycle. Roughly about that kind of August, September timeframe, which we're currently in, minus 73%. Before the end of the halving year, right around the time of the elections, the price of LTCN just went absolutely stupid and did 1,700% gains. BCHG, very similar thing here. So you can see that August, September timeframe. Again, nobody should be surprised by this. I mean, look, I'll be honest. I kind of thought that the flash crash we had last month was going to be the end of the drop, but maybe we get some kind of double dip here, and then, you know, the markets bottom out and then they take off in October after the Fed rate cut. They could even start taking off immediately after the Fed rate cuts. So maybe in another couple of weeks, we see the markets moonshot. But again, any of these things are possible. So you can see the massive drop on LTCN here, roughly about this same time frame last halving. So let me see if I can actually get this. You guys can see the drop on, not LTCN, BCHG was even bigger. This thing dropped by nearly 90%. before eventually going up a massive 1,200%. Okay. So, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily going to do 1,200%. It could do more, it could do less. But if I just show you guys that 1,200% here, it's slightly higher than the previous all-time high. Okay. So BCHG is roughly about that same price it was at around the same time in the same halving year, but in the last cycle, which is interesting because it's sitting at literally the exact same support. So if it did the same thing, it would basically go back up to roughly about the same previous all-time high, $60 to $67. I mean, if it went to 220, that would be fantastic. But me personally, if I was buying at 5 and it went to 67, I wouldn't be upset about that at all. But anything's possible. I mean, Dogecoin did a 700 plus X in the last cycle, so that should tell you something. So in terms of Bitcoin, again, I know this is a separate video, but I do want to cover this in this video. Okay. So in the last cycle, we saw something kind of a little bit different for Bitcoin. Again, we were in quantitative easing back then, and we'll get deeper into federal central banks printing money and their kind of secret liquidity that they use that we can measure over time, not just for the U.S. Federal Reserve, but for all the central banks around the world. But basically, they were printing money back here. Okay, so they cut rates. Bitcoin fell off a cliff, had this crazy flash crash. Again, something similar could happen when they cut rates. Bitcoin could drop. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen this time because, again, they kind of slammed rates into the floor last cycle. This cycle, I'm not expecting them to do that. I'm expecting a nice, easy, smooth transition from Fed tightening to Fed loosening. Okay, and I do expect crypto to go up and the dollar to fall. Even if they don't slam rates to the floor, I'm expecting still a bull market to continue. And again, I put my odds. If I had to give odds of a recession at this point, I would say there's like a maybe 10 to 20% chance of a recession and an 80 to 90% chance that there is no recession. Okay, and if there is a drop in the markets, it's like a correction or maybe a small bear market. Okay, maybe a 20% drawdown. Okay, nothing more than that. I don't think it's likely that it's going to be anything more than that. So, but the thing I want to point out here is last cycle Bitcoin kind of chopped sideways. Chopped sideways and went up into the end of the year. Okay, but we didn't start really seeing the big moves on Bitcoin until October to December of the halving year, also the election year, and kind of expecting the same thing to happen here. And again, we're kind of in this flag pattern. As long as we stay in it, it should still be bullish, and crypto should basically moonshot through the end of the year. So we saw a flag pattern back here, but it wasn't at the exact same time frame last cycle. But regardless, it did go up, and then it took off for the moon afterwards, and that's kind of what I'm seeing right now. So we'll get more deep into all this later on. But let's go ahead and go over the charts here. I will tell you guys that, these markets can't stay red forever. Okay, eventually they are going to have to reverse. And I know this is a cheesy analogy, but I love using it because it makes sense. Okay, what goes up must come down, and then what goes down must come up. Okay, markets moves in waves. They don't ever go up forever. They don't ever go down forever, but they do generally move in a trend in a particular wave. And you guys can see we have been in a downtrend for months on end, and it sucks. I'm not going to lie. We're in pretty substantial drawdowns in all of our positions. So if you guys think that you're the only ones that are suffering that, you're not. I promise you're not. So LTCN currently down 80%. Again, I do think this is a good dip buying opportunity. If you guys are worried about how to position yourselves in the market so you don't get smoked by the markets, again, look, I can tell you all right now, even the best traders, best investors in the world likely do get smoked by these markets from time to time. I have never met a person that has not taken a loss in the markets. Unfortunately, that is the game of trading and investing. Okay. Unless you're just an index fund investor and that's all you do is buy and hold and you never sell, you just plan on holding for 30 years till retirement. If you like to swing trade, you like to do options, stuff like that. Yeah, people that like to be actively involved in their investing like we do, even the best of us get smoked from time to time. It happens, guys. It happens. You just got to learn to, I can't tell you guys what to do, but, resilience, I will say that resilience does play a major factor in our ability to continue to grow with time. So anyways, LTCN did get a close below this trend line. So I'll tell you guys right now, I'd be looking at, and you guys can go back in previous videos for these resistance targets or profit targets. They haven't changed, okay? Or if you have them written down or whatever, that's entirely up to you. So 650 to 780 at support here is what I'd be looking at. And again, the first target I'd be looking at could be any of these resistances, or maybe even all the way up here at the swing high. So from the support, if it does get down here to the swing high, is roughly 620%. Again, the all-time high for LTCN is at $510. So that's almost a 10x the previous swing high here. And I will tell you guys, more often than not, there usually is kind of a big pump, or there's a big pump that happens. Okay, you can see this one, and then there's an even bigger pump that happens before the actual sell-off begins. Okay, so big pump, and it looks like a little baby pump here, but this is actually pretty huge. It's like a 4x on your money, and then it drops, and then it does a massive pump after that, just like a God candle. Okay, so we usually see that pretty often. With a lot of asset classes that are getting ready to go higher. Same thing here. Okay, with Bitcoin, I can show you guys with Bitcoin, little baby pump right here, then a pullback, and then the big one came afterwards, again, right around the end of the halving year, which is this year. So somewhere between, I would say, October to December of this year. I think likely November, December is when we see Bitcoin hit all-time highs. But the point here is there was a baby pump coming off the bear market lows, and then a small pullback, and then a massive rip to the upside. Okay, that's usually how these things work. You don't always get the biggest pump right away. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you get that God candle right away, but in a lot of cases, that doesn't usually happen. So small pump here on AMC, big pullback, and then a huge pump afterwards. Same thing with GME. Although this one's not really so obvious, you can see kind of this little tiny baby pump here, and then a pullback, and then a just absolutely stupid rip to the moon. I can even show you guys maybe some other charts where this happens. Okay. So you can see this little Palantir as an example. A lot of people love Palantir. A small pump, then a pullback, and then a big, huge trend going up. Okay. So I think you kind of get my point on this. And you guys can see, even though crypto had sold off recently, it is already starting to recover. Crypto is very resilient. Again, look, I'll tell you all right now. Okay. Every or nearly every crypto investor in the world is looking at these markets right now thinking the exact same thing that we are, that October to December is the time when Bitcoin usually goes to all-time highs and everything, and its brother that's crypto related is going to start ripping to the moon during that time frame. Every investor that has eyes on the crypto market, that understands the space, is probably thinking something very similar to us. Okay, and again, it's all about market psychology. When the market psychology of the masses decide the direction of something, that's usually where it goes. And for me personally, I'm bullish going into October to December. I think that we're probably going to see something similar on LTCN BCHG that we saw in the last cycle. You get a decent pump here, a pullback, and then you get the big one afterwards towards the end of the halving year. Probably going to be something similar here. And again, I can't promise or guarantee this, but I would give this probably like a 95 to a 99% probability that we probably get something like that. Okay. This is actually a little off. So it would probably look something a little bit more like this. So kind of creeping up into October, and then boom, kind of like that, going into the end of next year, something along those lines. So, but you guys can see the similarities between this cycle and last cycle, so I don't think I need to say much more about this. So BCHG coming back down to this kind of macro support level. The thing I want to point out here is, I don't know if you notice the similarities here, but we had this dump from this pump in August timeframe of the halving year last cycle. And where did it come down to the support? Same level that we're currently sitting at, nearly almost exactly with the current price, right around the same time during almost exactly the same month in the last halving cycle, before the big pump. Okay, that's the thing I want to point out here. So again, if you guys want to go over these zones here, I'm not going to go over these in detail because I kind of wanted to point out a lot of people have been asking about the timing of when this thing is going to go off, and I've been telling you guys for months the exact same thing. Okay, I've literally been telling you for months. October to December, maybe even January of 2024, 2025 is when I think personally we're going to see the biggest moves in crypto. Okay, everything's lining up perfectly for it. The Fed's going to cut rates this month. The labor market is still strong. The dollar index is dropping. The yield curve is going to uninvert, which some people interpret as a bad thing. I would say it's a bad thing only if the economy was falling apart, but the economy is not falling apart, guys. I can tell you right now, there's plenty of job listings. I see plenty of people out there fishing and doing their thing. Okay. If it was a ghost town and nobody was seen anywhere, I'd be like, okay, maybe it is a bad thing, but I'm just not seeing it. I mean, everything looks how you would expect it to look in a normal economic environment. I don't see the bearishness here. So again, this macro support that we had the big moonshot last time off of is roughly around $3.70 to $4. You guys can, again, go back in previous videos and look at these zones. I kind of wanted to touch on the timing of this a little bit more in this video. $24 at the swing high is what we're looking at here. So you'd be looking at, once again, roughly about a 6x on your money. Hold on one second. I got to remeasure this so I can give you guys the percentages here. So roughly about 488% move. HZEN, yeah, this was a major support level before the bears slammed this thing into the floor. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but altcoins generally do pop off a little bit later than Bitcoin and Bitcoin oscillators. So we'll just have to wait and see on that one. But as of right now, the macro support is still at this zone. So 260 to roughly about 290. Swing high up there at roughly about 1050. So measured move here, 283%. ETCG. I probably actually will use this particular chart in correlation with the uninversion of the yield curve and the Fed cutting rates, because the more history we have to go on, we can then kind of use it to compare the charts and see what exactly happened and how the markets overall reacted to these things when they did happen. So just want to let you guys know that. Okay, so ETCG has unfortunately cracked this support zone, and it has a red candle going into the support candle. So unless we get an immediate bounce next week, it may pull back further. But then again, you guys got to understand that usually Ethereum pops off after Bitcoin as well. Okay, so it goes Bitcoin, ETH, and the altcoins after that. So Bitcoin could still continue to trudge higher before blasting off into the end of the year while Ethereum actually pulls back. That could happen. Okay, because I'm not expecting Ethereum to actually start moonshotting until like around probably January to March of next year. So support here, I'm looking at $3 to $5. You could be saying that this $8 level here could be support, but in my opinion, that's a risk because again, Bitcoin, I expect Bitcoin to gain dominance still on ETH and altcoins until eventually Bitcoin tops out with its true cycle peak, and then we should see a roll over the dominance into the other altcoins. So if it gets down here and we measure it going all the way up to this previous wick high, you're looking at roughly about 417% move. If I wanted to measure it exactly from the bottom, again, I just do the kind of the middle of the zone because it's, I mean, if you guys can time the bottoms perfectly, great, but most people can't. So it then becomes 567%. Okay, so ETH-E, it is sitting at this white line. You can see that's a substantial line. If it cracks that level, maybe it stops here at 17. If not, then 1060 to 1560 is what I'd be looking at. Again, go back to previous videos for the zones. Current price to the previous highs up here, 94% move. And then if you can somehow magically manage to get exactly the bottom here to the previous swing high, 256% move. So Phil G, I mean, this thing just keeps kind of bobbing around the zone. I'm not sure if it really even knows what it wants to do yet, but it's kind of just sitting there. So that's 36 to 40 or 37 to 40, somewhere in there. Roughly about $5 to $11.50 below that is what we're looking at for the absolute bottom here. And again, I can't tell you guys with certainty it's the absolute bottom, but I mean, it didn't actually go any lower than that during the bear market, as you can see. So 1,030%. And then from that lower level there, roughly about 4,670% or 4,680%. So GBAT just kind of hanging on for dear life here at this support zone. again, that's $4.40 to $5. Lower support here would be roughly about $2.30. It remains to be seen which one is likely to happen. So 590% move, and then on this end, roughly about 1200% move. GLIV. So support here, roughly about, we'll just say 1190 to 1470 roughly in there, and then the all-time high is up here at $80. So 484% move. G-Link. Yikes. So this thing has a candle body literally pushing right into the bottom of the support zone. That's kind of scary. So if for whatever reason, and I think I actually did this backwards, so we're looking for a flip zone here, not necessarily for a bottom. So if for whatever reason this thing does break down below support, then it could potentially come down to this area right here. You see these candle tops, roughly about that $20-ish level, 2021, somewhere in there. If not, and it holds this, roughly about $40 to $45, and then the all-time high up here at $220. So best case scenario, 484% move, and that's, again, assuming that it just goes straight up from here. Worst case scenario, it pulls back down here, and then it goes all the way up to all-time highs for roughly about 950%. GSOL. So this thing finally did have a massive push down. Again, am I surprised by this? No. I kind of thought it would ride this trend line on the potential of a spot Solana ETF, but I guess I was mistaken. So yeah, if we look at Solana here, Solana has actually not pulled back as much, which is interesting. It's still going sideways. But again, the pullback on GSOL may have something to do also with the premium discount model that is attached to these. So, I mean, it cracked this zone pretty hard. I mean, it's sitting on the EMA, but it's still below the zone. So I would say likely I'd probably still be looking for that zone I've been talking about for eons with you guys, roughly around here. So this 170 to about $200 is what I'd be looking at. And then the highs up here at 580. That's about a 225% move. If it gets below that, then, well, I don't think it's going to get below that, but that'd be roughly about $70 to $80 in case you guys want to know. GXLM, so this thing's bleeding off slowly. Again, the next level here is 1460. So these are kind of pick-me-up levels. If I was looking to slowly position in, let's say I had $2,000, I wanted to put 500 here, 500 here, 500 here, and then 500 here as a way to kind of mitigate the downside risk. Instead of just dropping all of my money in right here. That's a good way to kind of hedge your bets, so to speak. Again, not financial advice. You guys can go back and look at the strategies that we talk about on this channel to kind of see what I'm talking about there. So 450 to 1150 worst case scenario, swing high up here at roughly about $70. So from that next level, we're looking at 369%. And then from the kind of bear market support here, we're looking at 920%, although I'd say this thing going back to bear market lows probably not likely. So there is a small chance it could happen. There's a very small chance it could happen, but I just don't think it's going to happen. Not for something like GXLM. So Mana support here 130 to 360. Again, I believe it or not, I actually don't think that these are likely to hit their bear market lows for a lot of these trusts. It's just that some of these are a little bit more resilient than others, like the Bitcoin oscillators, the ETH funds, and then something like Solana. So Mana cracked this white line. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to go lower. So I'd be looking at 150 to 325 here. The all-time high is at $70. It's roughly about 1,920% gain. Zcash, so it looks like it wants to come back and kind of triple tap this, maybe a triple bottom bounce here at 315. And then the swing high up here is at 10.25. So if it does get down there, then it just increases the amount of profit that you can make. I mean, if your price just so happens to be down here. So 218% move, support below that 160 to 280. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.